Quick, what do all these games have in common? If you're thinking they're all just great games, you're wrong. Well, okay, technically you're right, but that's not what I'm getting at, because they're all copycats. That's right, they built their success upon theft. And that's exactly why they're so good. We love to romanticize originality, this idea that a great idea can strike like lightning out of nowhere. But that just isn't the case. And in game development, and actually most forms of art, it just doesn't hold up. The truth is, the best game ideas aren't original. They're iterated, remixed, and refined over time. And yeah, sometimes they're outright stolen too, but there's a big difference between stealing an idea and stealing an identity. So how do we tell the difference? Well, let me start by breaking down the games that just briefly flashed across your screen. Balatro is poker meets Luck Be a Landlord. Stardew Valley is just Harvest Moon, but with modern polish and more heart. Minecraft? Well, it owes more than just a little to Infiniminer. Celeste stands on the shoulders of Super Meat Boy, which itself built upon Super Mario Bros. And other precision platformers. And Hades is built on Bastion, Dead Cells, and basically every other roguelike before it. Yet none of them feel lazy or cheap, like they're knockoffs of what they're inspired by. And that's because they each remixed their inspirations into something that's uniquely theirs. And I've done the same. In my last video, I mentioned that I made Wing Squadron, which was basically a demake of Star Fox, but with a roguelike twist. And Lair Keeper? Well, it's just Vampire Survivors meets Loop Hero with a splash of Dungeon Keeper in for flavor. Like the games we just explored, I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. I just took ideas that I loved from other games and remixed them into something that's mine. But that's not to say I haven't had a misstep. Earlier this year, I made a game called Pythia, and at its core, it was basically Balatro meets the Deck of Many Things. There was strategy, and it played completely differently than Balatro, but on the surface, could you really tell the two apart? No, not really. And as a result, most people just assumed it was a Balatro clone and ignored it. It didn't matter that what I had done was remix two different ideas and created a relatively unique concept. People couldn't look past that I didn't find my own identity, and they were right to do so. And funny enough, when I was making this script, community member Louie published a game that they had made, which was very similar to Pythia, but with a much better twist in mind on their part. And that's because they mashed Balatro with Pachinko, creating a game that they called Pachinkro. It's rough around the edges, sure, but it hooked me for well over an hour, and it clearly had an identity that Pythia lacked. By the way, if you'd like to join our Discord, the link is in the description below. We'd love to see you there. And actually, it was Pachinkro that made this idea click with me. You know, it's not just how X plus Y equals game, it's how does X and Y combined feel and play to you. And even the earliest video game examples understood this. Think about Pong. It's just table tennis stripped down to two paddles and a ball. But that wasn't a ripoff, and game design works very similar. Take something familiar, remix it a bit, and suddenly it's brand new. Now, if you spend any time on r/indie dev, you're eventually going to start to notice a bit of a pattern. Every so often, you'll come across a game that is so uniquely original that you have no idea who the market for it is. And as noble of an ambition as it is to make something that unique, there's a problem. Again, who's the market for this? When you remix games, instead of going for something truly original, you give your players something to anchor themselves to. For example, if you love Slay the Spire, you'll probably like Monster Train as well. But if you make something that's so uniquely original that people don't even know how to feel about it, let alone if it's for them, they're not going to want to play it. It would almost be as if I'm the best chef that has ever lived, and I've come up with my genius plate of mineral-infused rocks. No matter how many regulatory bodies I've sent it through and how safe I've deemed it to be, it's still just a plate of rocks. Nobody's going to want to eat that. And game development is basically that. Our brains simply are not wired for the unfamiliar. They're wired for pattern recognition. So when a player has something that they like, and they see a game that's similar to that existing thing, they're more likely to click it because they already know that they like what it's based on. And for game development, that's like half of your marketing right there. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule, with Getting Over It being the best example I can think of. It released in the mid-2010s, right as Twitch streaming was beginning to blow up, and it did something that no other game had really done before. It embraced player suffering. Of course, rage-inducing games have existed since the days of the arcade. It was a way to get people to put more coins into the machines. But they at least had a semblance of fun to them. They had to have a reason for the player to actually want to go there and put coins in the first place. But for Getting Over It, not so much. It is not a fun game. Its entire purpose is to frustrate you and make you angry. Why? Because that's perfect for Twitch streaming. Streamers need content, and something that's potentially going to take hours or days to beat, that is going to offer hours upon hours of rage-inducing moments, that's golden. And even though the concept was completely original, its audience was instantly clear. It was made for streamers, and by extension, their audience. And it worked. It carved out its own genre and inspired a ton of other games like Jump King and Only Up. But it's more of an exception than the rule itself. So what's the real lesson here? Well, games are not created out of a blank slate. You take a few game ideas that you enjoy and you put your own stamp on it. And the hardest part is figuring out what that stamp of yours is going to be. But whatever path you take, don't stress about being first. Focus on being worth remembered. Do that and I guarantee you'll see more success than chasing originality has ever yielded. Now, if you liked the video, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Seriously, they're the best part of making these videos. And hey, if you haven't already, subscribing and liking the video helps out a ton as well. Okay, now get out there and make the next great copycat game.